Ode to the West Wind, Part 5. The third stanza. In the first two stanzas, you had the effect of the west wind on land and on the sky. And now you will see the effect of west wind on the sea. For this, there is the image of the Mediterranean and the image of the Atlantic Ocean. And in the 14 lines, you see a very different impression of Mediterranean and a very different impression of Atlantic. Thou who didst waken from his summer dreams, the blue Mediterranean, where he lay, lulled by the coil of his crystalline streams, beside a pumice isle in BAII's Bay, and saw in sleep old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers, so sweet the sense faints picturing them. Thou, for whose path the Atlantic level powers cleave themselves into chasms, while far below the sea blooms and the oozy woods which wear the sapless foils of the ocean, know thy voice and suddenly grow grey with fear, and tremble and despoil themselves, O here. So you have the third stanza in which the poet describes the effect of west wind on the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. Talking about the Mediterranean, he says that the Mediterranean is like an old person who is lying and he is being lulled by the crystalline streams which fall into the Mediterranean Sea. And the place is beside a pumice isle in BAII's Bay in Italy. And Mediterranean seems to be dreaming, sleeping comfortably and dreaming about old palaces and towers quivering within the waves' intenser day, all overgrown with azure moss and flowers, so sweet the sense faints picturing them. He says that the Mediterranean is lying, is asleep, dreaming of old palaces and towers. You see the imagery, the richness of the imagery, that there are palaces and towers beside the sea, and the reflection falling on the waves make them seem to be quivering. It's the waves, it's the movement of the waves, but the poet fancies that the old palaces and towers seem to be quivering because Mediterranean is dreaming as such. And Mediterranean is rich in vegetation, so there is lovely moss and flowers. You'll see the word azure was one of the favorite words of Shelley. So you'll find the usage of azure many times in both Shelley and Byron. So sweet the sense faints picturing them. It's so sweet that you can just imagine picturing those moss and flowers which grow under the sea. But it's different with the Atlantic. Thou, for whose path the Atlantic's level powers cleave themselves into chasms. Atlantic is considered to be wild, fierce. The flow is quite harsh. So he says, but Atlantic and taming the taming the cruel is a passion of Shelley. So Shelley says that the west wind has the powers to tame Atlantic. It doesn't do anything to the Mediterranean because Mediterranean lies still dreaming of palaces and towers, and the foliage does not spoil because the wind blows softly over the Mediterranean. But the Atlantic has to make way for the west wind to pass, and while it does, the sea blooms and the oozy winds which wear the sapless foliage of the ocean know thy voice. The foliage of the ocean, the rich vegetation underneath grows grey with fear, is terrified as west wind crosses the Atlantic Ocean. They start trembling and they despoil themselves. They get uprooted. Oh, here. It's nothing but the movement of the waves, but Shelley has described it so beautifully.